That won't actually start until that's good.
What? Alright. So it's about a 30-second delay on this.
Is it?
I actually have to.
Yeah, we can insert them. Like, we can do it. That works.
So if you want to add a 30-second delay, it'd be a minute delay.
Alright, sir. It's all yours. We have the audio. Yep.
Alright,
Anything else you need from me at this point?
I don't think so. I think you're
Y'all did such a nice job with that. I didn't see all the other students. I did such a wonderful job with the last minute stints. It was like every day. It was like, I was like, this is like a play. I was like, around it. Like, I was like,
Hey, lady. How are you?
a seat. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Lead Small Gathering. Thank you guys all for being here this evening. We promise as a staff team that tonight will be well worth your investment. And if it's not, we'll give you your money back, okay? Shh, ruined it. I'm going to start off with prayer, so if you guys would pray with me. Father God, I want to thank you so much for the time that we have to come together tonight. God, I pray that you would guide our conversations this evening. God, that you would guide the direction of Westminster Church. God, I pray that you would bring us around some great conversations tonight, that your Holy Spirit would lead us, that your Holy Spirit would transform us and change us. God, I thank you so much for each and every person in this room. God, and I pray mighty and great things as a result of tonight and our time together. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to set the stage a little bit, give you guys a little bit of background. For the last 10 months or so, our discipleship ministry staff has been meeting regularly. And when I say regularly, I mean like regularly. We've been meeting most Mondays for about 2 or 3 hours on Mondays since August or September of last year. And that means adult ministry, youth ministry, and children's ministry staff. And we recognize that we are ministering to a lot of the same families here at Westminster Church, and we want to do that really well. And so over the last couple of months, we've also been meeting with other staff. We've been meeting with elders, with deacons, to get feedback. We really want Westminster Church to be a place of transformational discipleship and of deep, deep relationships. In youth ministry, this has obviously been a priority for me for many years. Life-on-life discipleship is the key to youth ministry. In fact, many of you have probably heard me say that we are seeing some different results as we watch students graduate from this millennial generation, which is those that are ages 12 to 29. Research is overwhelming in showing us that significant relationships are the key to helping children and students stick with their faith. So as the staff has met, we have prayed a lot, we've read a lot, we've thought a lot, we've talked a lot, and did I mention we've prayed a lot? We really have. We want to work better together as a staff team, and we want to work more intentionally at ministering to families here at Westminster Church. So what you see unfold tonight will be us setting the stage for a vision of a lot of the things that we've talked about and just bringing you guys on board with us. And what you'll see in the months ahead is us hoping to structure our programs and our ministry to really reflect the vision. So please listen closely tonight. There'll be some of us sharing up here with you, and then there's going to be some videos that you guys will watch with us together, and we'll have some discussions at our table. I promise you that we've worked hard to really honor your time here this evening. We've actually had to cut a lot of things out because we have so much that we've looked at that we just want to share that we're really passionate about. But I will tell you up front that we have saved a Q&A time for the end of the evening. But there are index cards at every table with pens. If you have a question that comes up, write that question down on the index card so you don't forget it, because we do want to come to those. But as questions come to your mind, they may be answered in the next segment. So we're not going to stop after every segment and take questions. So write those down. We'll have a Q&A time at the end. Our Q&A time will probably last until 8:40, 8:45. So if you can't stay, if you need to make a call now and say you'll be a little bit late, we'd appreciate that. But if you can't stay, we've got a basket up here on the table, and you can feel free to put your index card with your question in that table, put your name and your email, cell phone number, whatever, and we want to contact you because we want to be really intentional about making ourselves available as staff members to you guys as well as you have questions. So this is a partnership. And speaking of partnerships, has anyone noticed there's a dominant color in this room? The color orange. If you know me, there's only one reason that the color orange is in this room, right? Yeah. Just saying. So if everyone would like to okay, just kidding. We're not here because of Clemson University, although football season is starting in like 20-something days, but I'm not counting. But truly, orange represents something else, and you'll see that on the next slide here. In its simplest explanation, you get orange by combining the primary colors of red and yellow. So if you look at the bracelets you've been given, does everyone get one? If you did not get one, Trisha has them somewhere. Bill has them. I think he's shooting them out in the foyer. On the yellow side, you'll see yellow stands for the light of the church, and the red stands for the love of the family. And when you mix those together, you get orange. And we believe that you can make a much greater impact when you mix together yellow and orange. So if you look on the inside of your bracelet, it actually says the church plus the home equals greater impact. The average church only has about 40 hours a year, approximately 40 hours a year to influence a life. The average parent has approximately 3,000 hours a year to influence a life. So this ought to change the way that we do discipleship. In children's and youth ministry, this really means that we don't want kids and students to just get dropped off at the door by parents and for us to never have connections with those parents. Orange is much more strategic than that. Parents are the most influential person in the life of a child. I don't care what your 16-year-old kid is telling you, parents are the #1 influence in the life of a child. This is God's design. So if we're thinking orange, then this means that we will be discipling kids and students and parents. We want to champion parents. We want to support parents while they are at home during the week. We want to make sure that we are organizing and doing ministry in such a way that honors the parent, that resources them, that encourages them to leave their kids at home by bringing them into conversations of what a kid learns at church, so that church just doesn't stop at church. And what a kid learns at home doesn't just stop there, that we can reinforce what the parents are teaching. So we desire, more than anything, to see the family reinforced, and that's what we really want you guys to hear. So our small group leaders and our D group leaders, they need to be in contact with you as a parent. We need to work together to talk to one another, to support one another, to encourage one another, to pray for one another. So we're in this together, and that's what orange looks like. So I'm going to have Tricia come up and share some with you guys.
Okay, good evening. Thank you all so much for being here. One of the primary things that we're going to be talking about this evening is the importance of widening the circle of spiritual influence on your children. It's about allowing others to come alongside you as parents, to support you, to be another voice to echo your own, and to partner with the church as we live in covenant community with one another. And I think that as parents, we tend to lean into one of two directions. Parents will either not recognize their need to lead their kids spiritually, or even if they do, they might not know how, and then so they will just totally rely upon the church and Sunday school to do that for them. Or we can swing the other way to the opposite direction, and we can think that we don't need anyone else to help us. We've got this. We're capable of going it alone, and we can tend to go into what we might call hyper-protection mode. Neither one of these is truly biblical. Hopefully, we will land a little bit more in the in-between there. But most of you might be aware, probably are aware, that I have 7 beautiful, challenging, messy, heartbreaking, fun, and unpredictable kids. And I tended to land in this latter category as a parent while my kids were young and growing up. For 12 years, I was a homeschool mom, so I kind of naturally took on the full responsibility for their education and for their spiritual development, and thought, I can do this by myself. I might have also been reacting just a little bit to Hillary Clinton's slogan that it takes a village. So some of that just kind of made me all the more protective of my kids. And as far as when they were young, that worked well. Of course, at the time, I thought for sure that would always work well. Nothing was going to hit them in their teens that I couldn't handle, of course. But lo and behold, we did run into crisis, and as my kids got into their adolescent years, I found myself really scrambling for help. So it's with this perspective, after a lot of hard knocks, that I come to you and say that I think there is wisdom in recognizing a happy balance that we find in Scripture. Parents have been given the primary responsibility for the spiritual leadership of their children, but we're also not to do this in isolation. Deuteronomy 6:4, a pretty famous passage that we probably all know, where Moses gives God's instruction to the children of Israel, says this. It says, "Hear, O Israel, The Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates. And I think we often look at passages like this a bit through our modern lens, and we assume that these instructions were given to individual families alone. But the context of this passage is given to the whole nation of Israel. It's the people of God who are charged with this responsibility. So I'm happy to say that after swinging to the far end of the pendulum, I've learned to swing back a little bit. And I've learned that I was not intended to walk this road alone. And indeed, the church has really come alongside me, and I've been very grateful for that. I can tell you from personal experience what an absolute blessing it has been for me to have a John Strickland, who's here, or a Bob Brennan come into the life of my boys more than once. They've had some good man-to-man talks with my sons, echoing what I'm trying to say, but perhaps saying it in a way that they can sometimes hear it better when it's not coming from a parent. That's been a huge blessing. I've had that same kind of blessing in the lives of my girls. In particular, I can think of Robin Norton and Laura Leveroni have been a huge blessing to my girls. In fact, these women have just intentionally invested in them. It started in D groups, but I'll tell you, it was a great surprise to me earlier this summer when I just accidentally overheard a conversation that my daughter Hannah was having. And she was having it with her older sister Heidi, and she said, "Heidi, I can't be there on Wednesday night. I can't do that because I'm going over to Miss Robin's house because she's doing Bible study with me." And I thought, what? I didn't even know about this. She's going into her junior year of college, but that relationship has become so important to her that she would be there for Bible study at Robin's house, even in her junior year when she's home in the summertime, still connecting with her. So these coming out of relationships that started in small groups, but have just become organic and are just natural in her life. And she was even telling me this morning she wants to do something really special for Robin to thank her for all that she's done for her. So it's really cool when you see your 20-year-old reaping rewards that started back when someone was investing in her when she was 14. So this is why we have the body of Christ. I've come to realize I don't have to do it all, and neither do you. So Romans 12:4 reminds us, "For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them." And so that's what we're wanting to talk about tonight, is how we can use our gifts to work in one another's lives. And I did want to, we purposely brought together tonight both leaders, people who are serving in children's and youth ministry, along with parents. We wanted to get you both in the same room. The training, some of these videos that you're going to see tonight were originally geared for small group leader training. However, we thought it was so important to get you all on the same page that we wanted to invite parents into this conversation, and therefore we've kind of tweaked some of the questions, some of the discussion questions and stuff, so that it will help have conversation between our leaders and our parents. So I hope that this will encourage you, whether you're a parent or a small group leader, in discipling our kids in this whole next generation. Okay.
All right, we've heard a lot of people talk. I'll try to keep it short. We have a video coming up next, but I just want to give you scriptural basis for why we're doing this. It's not just pragmatic. It's not just something new. It's not just because, we found something neat and let's try it out because nothing else seems to be working. There is a scriptural basis for this. But let me first of all tell you the pragmatic side, the why it works and how it works side, and how it's worked in my life, just briefly. There's a reason why my family's at Westminster Church, and it's because of small group. I was coming out of a ministry where I was pastoring, and I was hurting really badly, and I needed healing. And I heard Ruffin say in one of his sermons something about a men's group. So I went up to him after his service and I said, hey, what are you talking about, men's small group? And he invited me to his Friday men's group. And that reason, I've told him this before, but that reason is the reason why we came to Westminster Church and why we stayed, and ultimately why I came on staff, because I saw that everybody on staff has this passion for discipling. I mean, there's a passion for living life with other people. It wasn't just a passion for preaching, although that is paramount. I believe that. I'm a preacher, so I believe that. But life on life, discipleship. And that's what got it for me, because Ruffin took time on a Friday morning, an early Friday morning, to speak into my life. And he didn't know me, but he spoke into my life, and that's why I came to Westminster Church, and that's why I'm on staff here now, because I believe in it, and I believe in it with all my heart. But there is a scriptural basis too. Matthew 28, it's a passage that you're familiar with. Go therefore and teach all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, and lo, I am with you always, even into the end of the earth. And sometimes we think that the main verb, I'm not going to preach, but the main verb in that passage is not go, but it has the idea of discipling, has the idea of teaching, has the idea of make disciples. And one thing that I learned, there's been times in my life where I haven't been in ministry, like paid ministry, full-time ministry. And one thing I've learned is that I don't need a title to be a disciple maker. Okay, I don't have to be called pastor so-and-so. I don't have to be called, youth leader, youth pastor, or I was a chaplain in the military. I don't have to be called Chaplain Whitcomb, okay? I'm a disciple maker as I cut grass. Okay, that's what I did when I was not in ministry. And that taught me more than anything that I was a shepherd of people. I was a shepherd of people. They were my clients, but I was shepherding their families, because what happened was I would be cutting their grass and be ministering to them in that way, and then I would talk to them, and inevitably the gospel would come up, whether it was believers or unbelievers, and I found myself discipling people as I was a lawn care guy. And it hit me. John Piper has a book called Brothers, We Are Not Professionals, and it talks about the fact that just because someone has the name pastor, or just because they have a staff title, doesn't make them professional, and so they're the only ones that are disciple makers. The book that really changed the way that I looked at this is called The Trellis and the Vine. This came out a few years ago, and when I read it, it transformed the way that I thought about discipleship. We have a copy of this book for sale. It's on the back table. There's also some copies that will be available throughout the Sundays. It's under my section of books that I think are important out here on the bookshelf, because I realized that we are all disciple makers. Okay, we all live lives, or we should, as Christians, we should all live lives that showcase Christ and that showcase the gospel. And so I don't need a title. I don't need, we don't say, okay, well, Ruffin, he's the pastor, so he needs to disciple, 1,000 people that are coming to Westminster Church. That's ludicrous when we think that way. Okay, and that's not what the scriptural basis is. We are all disciples. Do you remember what the last thing Jesus told his disciples before he went to heaven? Does anyone remember what it is? I'll give you a hint. It's in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. Yeah, he says, you will receive power, and you will be my witnesses. The very last thing, I like to look at it as the last will and testament of Jesus. The last thing that he wanted his disciples to hear was, go and do exactly what I've done for you. And what did Jesus do for his disciples? We could take a long time and go through the Gospels and see all the stories where Jesus took time with those 12 guys. And we can look at other passages where he took 3, Peter, James, and John. He spent time with them, and he poured into them. And do you remember what the religious leaders said about the disciples after Jesus left? He said, these guys are turning the world upside down. 12 fishermen, tax collectors, regular guys. Did they have a title in front of their name? Apostle John. Now they do, but back then it was just, oh yeah, you're Peter, you're the fisherman, right? Even in Acts, they were talking about these men. Wait a minute, why are these Galileans talking to us with such power? It's because they understood the power of Holy Spirit. The things that Ruffin is teaching us in his sermons about Holy Spirit power, about how we need to do this. This is not just for those of us who are on staff. We can't do this alone. It's for you. And we want to partner with you. We want to partner with families to see this in action. We want to see Orange happen at Westminster Church. I just want to read something really quickly from another book. I've got 3 books I want to highlight. So The Trellis and the Vine. The other one we're going to be talking a lot about this evening is called Lead Small Culture. Again, there's some copies available for sale on the back, and there'll be copies available for you there. This is a quote from page 29. In everyone's story of faith, there are people who have shown up and become catalysts for their spiritual growth. And I'm sure each of us could write down maybe 2 or 3 names of people in our life that either showed us the gospel for the first time or lived it out in a way that we knew that's what we needed to do. We wanted to understand it better. We wanted to be in a community of faith. We wanted to live that out. I can think in my mind right now of people that did that in my life, and I'm sure you can too. Another quote on pages 92 and 93. This is kind of what I just said, but this is a youth pastor said this. He said, small group leaders, you are the pastors of your small group. Let that sink in. Say, wait a minute. I'm not a pastor. Ruffin's a pastor. Brett's a pastor. No. You know what the word pastor means? It's a shepherd. You know what a shepherd does? Shepherds. Yeah, he guides a flock. He leads a flock. How big is your flock? Is it 1? Maybe. Is it 10? Maybe. I don't know how big your flock is, but guess what? You're a shepherd. And that's what we want to communicate to you. You're not just a volunteer. You're not a helper, a chaperone, a babysitter, a teacher, a discussion leader, chaos manager. You're a shepherd. And I love this about the staff at Westminster Church. We talk this way. Okay? This is in our conversations, that we are shepherding people. And that's what we want to communicate well this evening. The scriptural basis is that we are all shepherds. Okay? You might not have a title, you might not have a degree, but you're a shepherd. And so how can you do that better? How can we work together to do that better? Our last resource that we have is called Sticky Faith. Why are we doing this? We'll talk about this a little bit later. You'll see it on the videos, but there is a major reason that we are doing this. Sticky faith has to do with millennials who are living out their Christian life, and it's their parents' faith. And it's never stuck to them. It's never their faith. And so they are leaving the church in droves. And there's huge concern. I'm thinking, why is this happening? How can we prevent it? The reason it's happening is not necessarily because the evangelical church has bad preachers. That's not the reason. It's because churches are not discipling churches. They're just doing church. And from the trellis and the vine, the reason that it's called that is, if you know what a trellis is, I do landscape work. So a trellis, right, holds up a grapevine or holds up a rose bush. And at the beginning, the trellis is neatly painted, and it's nice looking and everything. But in 20 years, if the grapevine and the roses have grown and they've gone all around that trellis and just eaten it up, it's not going to look very nice. It's going to be all beaten up, And the premise is, a lot of times, churches spend more time working on the trellis, the building programs, making sure this runs smoothly, making sure we're filling gaps, than they do with actual tending the vine. And so what happens is the vine withers and dies, and all that's left is a facade of a church. And I'm sure you've seen this, I've seen it firsthand, where there's a church building, but what's going on inside? And we don't want that to happen at Westminster Church. We want to see disciples made, because we are all shepherds. We're all disciple makers. So we're going to watch some videos, we're going to see some ways that we can do this better. We're going to have some interactive things that are going to show us how to do this a little bit better. And then any questions that you have, we'd love to entertain those. And we'll talk through how we can be better shepherds, because we are all shepherds.
Okay. Just before we start the first video session, I want to introduce you to the speaker who's going to be on the video, so you're not wondering who is this character. We're going to be listening to a video brought to us by Reggie Joyner. He's the founder and CEO of Orange, hence Orange, a nonprofit organization that is providing resources and training to help churches maximize their influence on the spiritual growth of the next generation. Orange provides curriculum resources, training for leaders, all kinds of things for all the way from preschool through children, families, students. They also have something that they put on each year called the Orange Conference and the Orange Tour. The Orange Conference provides national training opportunities and for both senior pastors, church leaders, ministry volunteers, anyone who wants to come. Kelly Griffin and I had the great privilege of going to an Orange Conference in April and getting to hear him speak in person, as well as a lot of other wonderful, wonderful speakers. And we gained a lot from that. This is just maybe the tip of the iceberg of what we got from that conference. We are also planning on attending an Orange Tour. We actually have already purchased extra tickets, so if anybody wants to go with us, it will be in Fairfax, Virginia, this October 9th and 10th. We're planning to take some of our people with us who want to get really serious about discipling kids. So please let me know if you're interested in joining Kelly and I on that trip, and I think we might take along some youth people too, I'm not sure. Anyways, in addition to that, Reggie is also one of the founding pastors, along with Andy Stanley of North Point Community Church in Alpharetta, Georgia. So if that helps kind of give you a little idea of who he is. He's also the author and co-author of several books, including Think Orange, which was very influential for our discipleship ministry staff as we were gathering each Monday. He also co-authored this book, Lead Small, that Michael just referenced. He had the Lead Small Culture book. We have this one, actually, that we would like to give our small group leaders. So anyone who decides tonight or in the future that that's what you would like to do, we will give this book to you for free with the promise that you're going to be with us for a while. Okay? It's great training. We also, as he mentioned, have the Sticky Faith and the Trellis and the Vine over there. And what he didn't mention was we also have one other one called, this is by Reggie Joyner and Carrie Newhoff, and this is Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. This is a little bit about widening that circle of influence that I was mentioning. All of these books, except for the Lead Small one, because we're going to give that to leaders, will be for sale tonight for $8. That's some of these are $12 and $15 normally. If you purchase one tonight, we're going to help pay the cost of that, so we can give it to you for $8 tonight. After that, they'll be available on the book table, but they'll cost more after the night. So, anyways, without any further ado, we need to get to this session. So,
it's interesting when you start thinking about one of the things that moves us and drives us as an organization. It is that we're dissatisfied. We're dissatisfied with the percentage of kids who grow up in our church and walk away and drop out of faith and drop out of Christianity. And we feel like we can't keep doing business as usual. We can't just ignore the fact that we have to fundamentally look at a lot of the systems and a lot of the programs and a lot of the curriculums and a lot of what we're doing. We've got to ask hard questions about what we need to do in the context of that to create a different kind of experience so kids walk away with a mobilized faith. It doesn't really matter which expert you talk to. If you talk to Fuller will say 50% of kids drop out of faith and walk away from Christianity when they go off to college. Lifeway, will tell you 60% or so drop out of faith. Barna will say 70%. And you say, who's right? Whose stat is really more accurate? I don't know, and I really don't care. When it comes right down to it, there's about 50, at least percent, that we lose by simply kids walking away and being disillusioned. And last year, we spent the entire day talking about the dials that we need to turn and the insights that we need to come somehow put back in place so that they don't walk away. But the thing that concerns me even more than all of that is not the percentage of kids who walk away and drop out of faith. It's the percentage of kids, again, that never show up because they're growing up in culture outside the church. So as we recreate the model to keep the percentage of the 25% that are coming engaged with faith, we also have to think in terms about what kind of systems are we creating to build a different kind of ministry, to create a different kind of experience to reach the kids who are surrounding your church and surrounding your community and not going to church. But the thing that I think is important to think in terms of is that some of you in this room have realized that you're called to build relationships with the next generation on the front lines. And you bought into this idea, this notion, that it's not about the program, it's not about the attendance, it's not how many people show up to something, it's how are you organizing your ministry in such a way so that the relationships go down deep and so that you have people connected with caring adults. We've been working with a kid for the last couple of years. As a matter of fact, a year ago, this next week, she tried to take her own life in New York. She's a girl that we've been working with. She comes out of a sex trafficking environment, and for us, it's been a traumatic journey because, you know, if you've ever worked with someone who's really been broken by a lot of awful things in their life, it's just sometimes it's difficult to figure out if you're helping, if you're hurting, what really works. And this last summer at Big Stuff Camps, you know, I'd gotten off a phone call with her talking through some stuff that she was struggling with and dealing with, and I remember going to bed that night and I just couldn't sleep. And I wrote this down because I just wanted to remind myself. I just wanted to remind myself why this is important. And I don't know if this will make sense to you, but this, at the core of why we show up to lean into you and to work with you and to talk with your leaders is this idea. And this is what I wrote down that night. I'm absolutely convinced that if every teenager had a place to belong and someone to believe in them, it could radically affect their faith and their future. I can't do that for every teenager. I can't even do it for very many. But I can do it for a few. Isn't there something fundamentally that says to you, this isn't about us having a better presentation, us having a better ability to communicate. At the core of this, there is a relationship that has to take place between a leader and a kid, or a leader and a teenager, and that relationship holds within it the key to the future and the faith of that kid. Not simply because we know the right answers, but because we understand that God wired us for relationships to do life together. We decided to do something really unusual about 8 or 9 months ago. We decided that the role the small group leader plays in the average church is so important and so significant that we were going to spend our time and spend our energy organizing ideas around what that would look like and what that means and what that would be, to such a degree that we decided several months ago, before we hit Orange Conference, before we hit tour, we wanted to take some time to talk to you about why it's important to recruit leaders who understand that it's not about doing ministry to the multitude of the masses, but it's about doing ministry to a handful of people. If we're going to change the stat that we feel like exists and indicates that so many are walking away and dropping out of faith. And it fundamentally, comes down to this one issue. And I hope you'll understand it and agree with this. That what you do for a few will always have more impact than what you do for many. Somewhere along the way, we have created a role that she represents. Tell me your name. Gail. Gail represents the role of a small group leader. I mean, sometimes we use the word teacher, sometimes we use the word leader, but in our world we use the word small group leader. That means that she has decided to invest in a few people over time, and that we have this core responsibility in our church to recruit people to do life with kids and teenagers. And we would say that's different than having a class. We would say that's different than teaching a lesson. We would even say that one of the fundamental struggles has been over the last few years, we don't really know how to define this and clarify what this is sometimes when we're recruiting people to do it. But we know it's a critical part of discipleship. I even think it's important for a small group leader to know what they don't do before you can even start talking about what they do. Because what Gail has done is not simply be a parent. It's not really that. It's not even being a coach or a teacher. It's more than that. It's not a counselor. It's kind of bits and pieces of all those things. And yet at the same time, not any of those things. And if I were to define this for you in a way where we could talk about it with all of our churches and all of our leaders and everywhere, I would say this about a small group leader. A small group leader is simply someone who's made a choice to invest strategically in the lives of a few over time so you can help build an authentic faith. To do something for a few, don't miss this, that you can't do for many. There's an irreducible minimum that you have to understand and recognize that you're able to accomplish certain things with. That if you get beyond that, if it gets to a certain size, if it gets too many, you can't accomplish the same kind of thing you can with a few. So in your church and in my church, in our organizations, if we're effective and if we're strategic, what we're going to do is we're going to reorganize all the time to reduce it down to the few that we can do ministry with and disciple with effectively. Because if we let it get too big, if we let it grow too large in the context of relationships, it limits our potential to build authentic faith. So we have to be intentional about leaning in to the Gales of the world and other leaders and saying, we want to give you a few that you can be the custodian of for a period of years, to invest in them strategically. Why? Not just to make them better people, to help them have a better future. No. To hand them off a faith in a way that you couldn't hand them off the same way if there were a lot of people. Again, the reason this is so important is because it means if you really believe this, and this is a critical part of making sure that the next generation doesn't just walk away. It means we've got to take a hard look sometimes at how we're organizing our churches and how we, do ministry. We've got to recognize that as important as the platform and as important as the big room and as important as the presentations and as important as all those things are, that those things should be steps to leading people in the context of relationships if we want faith to go deeper.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to interact at your tables. We've got a couple of video segments, and in between those, you're going to have a few minutes to interact at your tables with what was said. So you've got questions in front of you, a stapled packet. Each person there should be enough at each table for every person to have one. And the video that we just saw was the introduction. So there's a question on there. I'm going to give you guys about 5 or 10 minutes max to just go around and talk about that question, discuss it for a few minutes. And after a few minutes, I will appear rude and have to interrupt you so that we can move on to the next video, okay? hate to cut off your conversation. These are all about relationships, but I gotta cut you off, and we're gonna move on to the next video. I promise to give you an intermission, but if I don't cut you off, I can't give you more food or intermission, so. I told him I'd be the bad guy, sorry.
This is you, you're an orange dot, of course, because you're a small group leader. And what other color would you be? So you're orange, and this represents, the small group that you're called to lead, and this represents right here, actually, one of the people in that small group that you're connected to. So if you were drawing this on a napkin, basically the first principle I would give you, the first principle I would say, is simply that God has called you to be present. That ultimately, that's what you're to do as a small group leader. To decide you're going to be physically present in the life of a few people. You're recruiting leaders, you're recruiting other people to be physically present in the lives of a few. Because there's nothing else that can substitute for physical presence. Now let me explain this to you for just a second. I believe with everything in me that you should spend as much money as you possibly can to help children and help teenagers. And you should fight for the budget you need to create great environments for kids and for teenagers. I believe in the excellence in production. I believe in the excellence in communication. I believe in all of that because we're trying to capture the imagination of children and teenagers, and I don't apologize for that. But let me say this also in relationship to that. All of that does not substitute for having a consistent adult in the life of a kid. A consistent adult who's physically present in the life of a kid and who does life with them. If you have to economize in a given year in your budget, don't economize relationally. Make sure that you're giving your attention and your energy to make those relationships, have significance and have a place in your church and ministry. Because here's the reason why. You can spend your thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on production and on lights and on video and on all the tools. And I'm for as much of that as you can afford and you should leverage. But at the end of the day, there's another organization that's going to come into your city that will outproduce you in culture. It'll be Nickelodeon, it'll be Disney, it'll be Broadway. I'm just telling you, you can't compete financially with the presentation they can put on. But here's the good news. Don't miss this. They can't compete with what you can put in the life of a kid relationally. You should play to your strength. I don't care if you're a church of 50 or a church of 5,000. You should play to your strength, and your strength is right here, putting people in the lives of kids in a way that they're present. In this world where we believe in social media and we believe in using the techniques and all the tools that we can possibly use, don't misunderstand. Those things can never be a substitute for having someone who says, by being physically present in the life of a kid, I am going to show up for you and I am going to be there for you, and on my calendar you are a priority to me, and I'm going to show you that because every week I'm going to be there. One of my heroes is a man named Jeffrey Canada. Jeffrey Canada was another education reformist, or is another education reformist. He's in New York City. And he created the Harlem Children's Zone. And Jeffrey Canada, there's a documentary that's out about him that came out a few years ago called Waiting for Superman. Maybe some of you have seen it. And the documentary is really built around his life. And basically because he grew up in Harlem and he believed that Superman was real. And he believed that one day Superman would come and rescue him from Harlem. He said the saddest day of his life was when he recognized and realized that Superman was not for real. And somehow in his story, Jeffrey Canada ended up going off, graduating from Harvard, and coming back to Harlem. And I had the opportunity to kind of interview him and to talk about, his strategy and his philosophy, reaching the blocks in the neighborhoods there. And it is just really genius. I mean, he basically just started with one block, and he started, basically reaching in and rescuing kids there and giving them an education. His whole strategy is really simple. If he can get kids that are in those blocks and in those neighborhoods through college, their chances of going to prison drop 80%. So he's trying to get them from those neighborhoods through college. But in the interview, actually after the interview, after the video cameras were turned off and the lights were turned off, I'm sitting in the hallway with Jeffrey. And I said, if you could say anything at all to churches around the country and Christian leaders to engage them in the battle for public education, the battle for helping kids, what would you say? He said, there are a couple of things that come to my mind. He said, one is, I would lean in to leaders and remind them that the reason there's so many kids like the kids in Harlem who grow up not believing in God is because there's so many kids who never have adults in their life that are God-like. They never have interaction with other adults who give them a resemblance or an indicator or a demonstration of who God is. And then he said this. He said the reason that the work of the church is so important and the reason it's so important to be present in the kids' lives is because you're connecting them to something that's bigger than just themselves. You're connecting them to a community of faith. And that's what being present means. And this is what he said. One of the biggest things the church can do, the greatest missions the church can have in communities where there are children and teenagers, is to be present in their lives so that they can understand what it means to have someone forgive them. Because most kids grow up in so many of these environments and they've never had an adult, a caring person who gave them a sense of belonging and somebody who believes in them, who would actually forgive them for something they did wrong, so they don't know the power of being forgiven and restarting their life. I just think we got to recruit a generation of leaders and just lean into them and say, listen, we just need to be present. We need you to be present. We need you. What that means, and we got some practical applications for each one of these that will help. What that means is we want you to show up predictably. Show up consistently. We're recruiting leaders and saying to those leaders, no, we don't want you to be here every other week or every month. We want you to work toward being in a kid's life predictably for a season of time. That season of time looks different for children in preschool and it might for teenagers. Actually, the older they get, the more we would like for you to consider, being connected to them for a period of years so you can earn relational change in your pocket. But what we're asking you to do is to show up predictably. We're also asking you to show up mentally. This is part of your job description.
Yep.
That we want you to tune in, and that means you want to turn some things off so that you are there in their life and you're prepared and you're ready for whatever the lesson is, whatever it is we're going to talk about, whatever the bottom line is that we want to connect them to, the piece of faith that we want them to understand and wrestle with. We want you to kind of have done your homework and to show up predictably, show up mentally, and to show up randomly. You say, what does that mean? That you use social media, that you use other tools, that you are in a kid's life predictably and you're tuning into them mentally, so from time to time when they're taking an exam or when they're showing up at their graduation, that you're there to be one of the cheerleaders, one of the fans in their life who've shown up to remind them that there's someone who believes in them and someone who cares. I can't begin to tell you the stories. We're going to unpack some of this in the session after this, specifically for those of you who are with children, those who are with students, to kind of show what this looks like. But I can't count the times I've had small group, teenagers, or teenage girls or guys say, hey, you know what, I got a text from my small group leader, they knew I was taking an exam tomorrow, and they just sent me a message. You have no idea what it means to me to know there's another adult in my life who cares and who's interested in what happens in my life. So we're asking you to be present. Be present and show up predictably, show up mentally, show up randomly.
So, some powerful stuff there. Being in youth ministry, I've seen some of what he's talking about happen, and there's some great stories. There's some students in the room tonight who are wanting to invest in the generation younger than them because they've been invested and they've had this stuff happen in their life. I think of, Trisha mentioned earlier, Robin Norton, and Robin would hate to know that her name was being shared tonight. She couldn't be here. She's pretty humble. But she started being a D group leader for some girls that were in 9th grade, 8th and 9th grade, I think. And she followed them, some of them, all the way through to graduation. And she continues to this day to meet with those girls and to have them in her home for summer Bible studies when they're here. And like Trisha said, I found that out last year when she said, I'm gonna have them in my home for summer Bible study. And she was telling me who was coming over, and I thought, these are girls who want to come home and see Robin. They care about seeing Robin. And I look at her and I go, that's awesome, because those are 5 or 6 girls I don't have to worry about. Like, I don't have to, fret over as a youth director, because I want, my girls taken care of. And I go, Robin is shepherding them, like Michael said. She's caring for them. She's investing in them. I can think of many youth leaders in the past that have just done phenomenal jobs at showing up for students, showing up at their plays, at their musicals, showing up at their soccer games, their basketball games with signs, cheering them on, and taking the other students in their discipleship group to go with them. Some of you guys in this room have done that, and I just want to support that and say kudos to you guys that have done that. I also wanted to mention Wendy Catt. I'll come over to her so she doesn't have to come up here. But Wendy leads teaches some 3-year-olds, and I'd like for Wendy, if you don't mind, just sharing with us a little bit about how you got involved in that.
I had been coming to Westminster for about 3 months, and in a church this size, it's kind of hard to know whether anybody even knows you're around, especially when you're naturally quiet in a wallflower. And when you drop your kids off in a room with somebody you don't really know, it makes you a little bit nervous. And you never really know if they ever really notice that your children are even in the room. And I got a note from my second child's Sunday school teacher, Gwen Overby. She sent me a note specifically about Audrey and what a blessing she was to her in the classroom. And that really meant the world to me as a parent. And that really made me think, you know what? This teacher cares about my child and has reached out to tell me that she has noticed my child in her classroom, and that meant a lot to me. It made me realize that this could be a place that could be where I call my home, and I would like to start to get involved, and I have been now for about a year and a half.
Most of you guys know how awesome Gwen's legacy is, and so just to hear stories like that, it's the little things and the big things that go a long, long way. So I'd like for you guys just to spend a few minutes at your table, flip over on the back of that sheet, and it says session 2 is be present. Also want to point out that you've got these rings at your table. Each person should have a ring. And if you'll look, it coincides with the video. So if you'll flip, the first one says lead small. And if you'll flip over, it says be present. It's got those 3 categories that he talked about being present in, if you need to remember those. So take just a few minutes and discuss those top 2 questions. And again, I'll rudely interrupt you in just a few minutes. me break you up again, rudely interrupt you. I would like to, I'd like to ask you guys to talk back to me a little bit about question number 2 there. It says, our vision at Westminster is to be a community that images Jesus Christ in his renewing of all things. In what ways can being present in the life of a kid image Jesus to them? Hopefully some of you guys got to question 2 maybe. Any thoughts about what that looks like? Rachel.
I had just actually spoken. Kids are very simple-minded. They are not complex like we are. They like to touch things, they like to see things, they like to play. They need tangibility. So our role in that is to be God, Christ to them. It looks like engaging eye contact sometimes. Think about it. If you're 5'3" like I am, and I'm talking to a 2-year-old standing up, I'm not engaging that child very well. I probably look like, the green giant to them. Engaging a child means getting on their level. When they're excited because they have sparkles on their shoes. Get excited because they have sparkles on their shoes. Look at the different colors in the sparkles. That means something to them. That's what Christ does for us. We are called to call him Abba Father, our daddy. We are children of his. So he deals with us in the same way to come to us. We get excited about things. He celebrates with us no matter how great, no matter how small. As should we. That's how we can image Christ to kids. Listening. We all want value. We all want value. They are valuable. They are gifts. Every single one of them. Your own, yours, all of them. They're gifts. And reach down and love them and let them know they have value. You are important. We are glad you're here today. And don't just say it. Mean it. Mean it. Even the ones with the snotty noses. Okay? Even the ones that come in and you're like, oh, there's a lot of germs coming in that door. Yes, guess what? You have a washing machine. When you get home, you can throw that shirt in the washing machine and the germs are gone. But what you have given to them that day does not get washed away. And I mean that on the good and the bad. If you've had a bad day and you walk in there with that bad day, they're going to feed off of that bad day. Don't we all know that Satan attacks on Sunday mornings? Absolutely. So wash him off before you go in and love, just accept those kids. Identify them as individuals. God knows my name. My name is written in the book of the Lamb. Amen. He knows my name. We should know their name. That's a way to image Christ. So that's just a few things that I have to say about how we can practically image Christ. Know their names, engage them, get down on their level, touch them, love them, accept them, value them, because that's what they're looking for. And they will see God and they will come to know him through you and what you're doing to show them who God is. That's what we're to be, the hands and feet. We are to be Christ in the image for them to see. So, thanks.
Okay. Said it all. Anybody else want to add anything? Peggy? Yeah.
This seems to happen to me a lot. I don't know why, but several times I do the large group for the elementary, and there's several different children who would come to me and say, I need you to pray. And I would stop and get on my knees and just pray with them with whatever it was that they needed. And then I started the habit, so then I would come every week with some new issue, which was fine. But I've noticed other kids now will randomly ask me to pray for them, and that just blows me away, because it just this one, and I do, not because of my connection, because of his grace on me, but just like Mary Jo said, just knowing them by name, looking them eye to eye, and just hurting with them when they hurt. There's some kids hurting, some really strange things going on in the families. And so just that's another way Jesus just being there praying with them and for them. Jesus really good.
I guess I'll go ahead and just add this bit. I love though, I mean, we think of our vision and our mission statement for our church of imaging Jesus and his renewing of all things, and I can sometimes get really theological and way up here with it. And yet I love what you guys have added just to make that so very real and very practical. And how many of us thinks about doing that with our little kids? Because they're people too, and that's what God has called us to do as well. But I did like this quote I wanted to just read to you. It's a little bit like what Reggie said on the video, but it's, kids may never know God unless they first know someone who loves God and can show them what God is like. So just like the way that that is stated as kind of a very practical outworking of our church's vision and mission. Before we, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. We're going to take a moment here because if you're going to work with kids or students, you have to be willing to have some fun, okay? It's their love language. So when you say yes to kids, you say yes to laughter, silliness, fun, braving their mess, following Jesus, heartbreak, giving of ourselves, the unpredictable, investing for a lifetime, being uncomfortable, taking a risk, stretching your faith, and making people matter more than programs. So welcome to the Yes Game. The Yes Game is going to be a game that we're going to play here momentarily, where you agree to say yes before you know the question. Because when you say yes to kids, you never really know what you're saying yes to. Okay? So we're going to kind of play this out a little bit in a game. So I need two really brave adults. I'd like to have a male and a female who are willing to say yes before they know the question. And I will give you one little clue. You need to not be gluten sensitive. So, who are going to be my brave adult man and woman? Mm-hmm. All right. Great job. Good job here. Okay.
I have to say this, has anyone seen us for the last 3 weeks?
Okay. We also need David and Emma who are going to help play this game. Okay, and you guys need to face this way because you've already said yes, right?
I said yes.
Okay, and you are saying?
Already said yes.
Okay. Okay, so now the question is going to come up on the screen behind them, and you all can read the question to them. Are you ready?
Are you willing to be fed?
Yes! All right. Keyword, be fed. Okay. Some of you might need to stand up in the back in order to see this. You're laying on your bed.
Chocolate.
It's in the bowl beside me.
Okay. You're going to get involved in children's or youth ministry. You just never know what you might be subject to.
We never do this in youth ministry.
We gotta cheer on and see who's gonna win, the men or the women. Oh, come on, girl.
Emma and David have to hold the string in their mouth. They can't use their hands either. No one can use their hands, and you're going to feed them the donut. You're going to dip it in chocolate, and then let them take a bite. On your mark, get set, go.
Okay, we're going to set a timer for 30 seconds and we'll see who has most of the donut gone in 30 seconds. Is the timer set? Go. No hands, Emma, no hands. Even though I would like to root for the ladies.
Oh, there we
So it appears as if
Without cheating.
Scott actually has more chocolate on his face. That's all I'm going to say. All right, wait. Okay, while they're cleaning up, we're going to have a 5 to 10 minute intermission. So feel free to use the restroom, get some food. For being good sports, though, we have a prize for you both. You can choose any of these books that you'd like for free. And we have a key ring for you that also is our light of the church.
Good job.
environment that we're asking those of you who are leaders to create. That's critical in the sense that we're asking you not only to be present, but we're asking you to create a safe place. There is this idea, and this kind of goes back to an illustration that we use sometimes, where in the ancient days they would take roses and they would carve roses into the frame or the ceilings of a lot of political conference areas, where they would basically be saying to the people who met in the room, you know, with the roses, this is sub rosa, this is under the rose. What happens in this room stays in this room, because you need a place that's safe, you need a place that's confidential to talk about critical issues, even to the point that after a few decades of using this as a symbol, the priests in their confessionals would have roses carved into the confessionals, because it was their way of saying, this is a place where you can confess, and this is a place where you can talk, and this is a place where it's safe for you to kind of deal with the issues in your life and know that you will be protected in what you say here. The point is this: we all need a safe place. We all need a place where we can go and process and deal with stuff. And part of your job as a small group leader, and part of your job as a church who's creating a culture that leads small, is to give kids safe places to process their doubt, and safe places to wrestle with their questions, and safe places to talk about their issues, so that along the way you understand what that looks like and what that means. And again, we have, 3 applications that we would show you here. One is, that means that as a small group leader, if you're going to create a safe place, you lead the group. That means you're responsible for the dynamic of what happens in the group. You're responsible for the discussion that happens in the group. You're responsible for guarding the relationships in the group. And this is an interesting dynamic, because this is your group right here. It's made up of a lot of different personalities. There are all kind of people that show up in your 9th grade girls group. And you're responsible to lead this. That in and of itself makes you nervous, doesn't it? Because if you know me, if I know you the way that I know most small group leaders of most groups, you're looking around the circle and you've just got some drama that exists there. And any of you who let teenage girls know exactly what I'm talking about. And here's the point. It's not your job to fix this. It's your job to allow the tension to be there, but to manage the tension. That's different than resolving the tension. You may not be able to resolve the tension in this group, and that should set you free. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to leverage the tension. The tension is okay. The tension is going to happen because you're leading a group sometimes, of teenage girls who are, going through a season of life that's difficult, or you're leading another group that has a wide spectrum of faith. You've got a person over here who's not a Christian, a person over here who's grown up in the church, and you're managing those discussions and you're managing those dialogues. But the differences that exist in this group that you're leading will help you have opportunities to demonstrate unconditional love. You realize that? It's not that you're trying to fix all of this. No. You want to leverage the differences to demonstrate to everyone involved in this that there's a place where people may disagree, where people may not see things the way, that everyone else sees it in the group. But that's okay, because we have an environment where we care and we love each other, and we're going to accept each other with those differences. This is the greatest place in the world for kids to show up and understand the power of acceptance if you lead this the right way. But it means you're in charge of leading this. And it also means you have to respect the process. You can't get this person to where this person is overnight. You can't change this person here. In fact, this is huge. Because some of you thought, you were getting into this so you could change people's lives. And you're tired because you've been trying to do that. And some of you recruited leaders and said to leaders, you're going to change your kids' lives, and you gave them a bunch of 6th grade boys. And they haven't seen a lot of change, to be honest with you. They just haven't seen a lot of change. And they're coming back to you going, okay, here's the deal. I had this friend of mine who said, hey, I want to have a 6th grade boys Promise Keepers group. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, go for it. About 3 months later, he comes back and says, it's not working. I said, really? He said, no, it's not working at all. They're not taking anything I say serious. I said, they're not? They're really not? He said, no. I said, are you telling me that not one of those boys has stopped and said to you, listen, I just want you to know that because of what you said today, I understand grace deeper than I've ever understood it, and God is changing my life in a way that I never dreamed you could change it. I just want to thank you for that. He said, nobody has said that. I said, that's because they're 6th grade boys. The truth of the matter is, when they're 11th grade, they might sit in a room with a guy and they might make that statement, and you're the one who did it, but he won't know it. He'll take credit for it. But see, it's not up to you to change them. As a matter of fact, here's a good exercise. This will set you free. If you're a small group leader, or you're recruiting small group leaders, this is just good practice. Just repeat after me. Just repeat after me and trust me right now. I am not God. I am not the Holy Spirit. I cannot change anyone, but I can love a few. Bible doesn't say change your neighbors yourself. It says love your neighbor. This is good for your marriage too. I talked about with Logan sitting here a while ago. I had kind of premarital counseling with Logan. He was sitting right up in the front row. God isn't calling you to change your spouse. He's called you to love your spouse. He's called you to love each other. It's up to God to do the changing. You're not the Holy Spirit. You will be a lot less tired if you'll just decide it's not up to me to change them. It's up to me to be present in their life, to create a safe place, and to respect the process of what God's doing in their life. Guard the heart. Hopefully you'll unpack some of this in the next breakout too. I'm not going to go too far down this, but that also means that you may have to contradict what I said at first. There are times when you may have to break confidence. There are times when you have to put in policies where you may have to go to a parent or go to a leader if someone is talking about hurting themselves or hurting someone else or they're being hurt. We call that the 3 hurt principle. The point is, you have a few people that you're involved with and you're engaged with them in their life. Create a safe place.
All right, direct your attention to your discussion guide again for the Create a Safe Place discussion, and again, give you a few minutes at your tables to talk about those questions, okay?
And not making them think there's only one right answer. There is one right answer.
question number on create a safe place was, how can you create space for your kids to express doubts and questions safely? If they do express doubts and questions, how can you handle them? That can sometimes be a tough question. So any thoughts or feedback from your table discussions that you'd like to share with the rest of us? Please. Question one, yeah.
We were just talking about having that openness to listen to them about the judgment and then have those candid talks with them, even if they're acting goofy and crazy during it. They still hear you, and as long as you're there and you're still, when they express doubt, and you're still doing things for them, you haven't rejected them or you're doing things for them. And that kind of sets the stage, you know, that they're kind of talk to you as they have those times when they kind of stray or they have doubts.
Absolutely. Listening.
Yeah, listening.
That's key. Huge. Yeah. What else?
I think it's important to communicate to them that doubts and questions are part of growing, and that you don't grow without doubts and questions. So it's a good thing to have them, and that it's necessary.
Absolutely. Doubts and questions are part of growing. Yeah.
I think so too. Be relatable. We've doubted, we've questioned, you know, walk with them, get in the mud with them. Hey, you know, your doubt is, you know, I accept what you're saying, I totally see where you're coming from, you know, and just relate to them, you know, if you've had doubt or struggle.
Absolutely relate to them.
And even if you don't have the same doubt or question, you know, struggle with that same one, I think it's important to get, you know, tell them Jesus is not afraid of your doubts and questions. He's not offended by your doubts and questions.
Right. Yeah, giving them those safe places to express that is huge. Anything else?
Maybe the other side of this, if we don't do this, don't be surprised then when they don't listen to anything. Because I had a lot of doubts and questions, even though I grew up in the church, and you know, for me, I was not given the opportunity to express those doubts and just questions that I had about why are we doing this, you know, why was I taught this, and for me, I just shut down then. I mean, I was totally, I wouldn't, whoever was my authority, I was like, well, you know, they haven't given me the opportunity to express what I feel, so I'm not going to listen to them. Because that was my way of rebelling was, you haven't given me the time of day to listen to me, to my doubts and things I'm struggling with, so, you know, even if they were, it doesn't matter if they were right or wrong in what they said, I'm not going to listen.
You can ask probing questions, you know, kind of draw them out a little more. Talk to them, questions, rather than act on their own.
Also ties back to what we talked about before, being present, being consistent. It's a lot easier to be safe with somebody that you spend time with every week than you face, if there's not going to be that safety that's you face.
Did you guys catch all that? Being present with them goes back to that point. I had a student, when I worked at a church in Atlanta, we had a student who didn't grow up in a Christian home, and he was in 10th or 11th grade, just had a lot of questions. He didn't understand the Bible. And so he came to it and just said, I don't believe this, because I didn't grow up with this understanding. And had another youth leader that met with him each week. He would come to youth group each week, but this guy took time outside of that and met with him each week and just said, what are your questions? Let's just tackle them one by one. And over time, got to watch that kid come to Christ because this guy spent time with him, just addressed the questions. And he said, I don't have all the answers either, but I'll help you figure them out. We'll look at the Bible together. So that was really cool to watch that kind of stuff happen. Yeah, Lynn.
I'm a child foster, I've had 24 foster children. And one of the things I've learned is that when they come to you, is to have a poker face. When they go, don't show extreme emotion, like, oh no, that's the growth. You just say, oh, okay, all right. You want to talk about it more, and while you're calming down, whatever scary or shocking, while you're calming down, let them talk about it. Okay. But to not show extreme emotion, because that's going to put them back and go, I don't want to talk about it. But as long as you're calm and you're, approach that way, they're willing to talk about it.
Absolutely. You guys probably experience that too when you share something with someone and they kind of look at you and you're like, oh, that was not safe. Retract that. You know what that feels like. So practicing that, that's huge. Thanks, Lynn. All right, we're gonna, the next section is partnering with parents. So we have this light green section here, and this will be a good time to think about the parenting role and the small group leader role and how those work together.
We understand the power of family, and we understand the power of parents. Parents will have influence in the heart and life of the kid, whether it's good influence or bad influence, surely because of the amount of time that parents and kids and families will be together, there will be influence there. You will only have about 40 hours in a given year as a small group leader if you invest in these kids. And let's say you take it to a camp, Kid Jam, or another camp, we can double that to 80 if you want to, but you still have a limited number of hours that you're going to have with a kid that you're going to spend with them. That's represented by this. The family, by default, is going to have 3,000 hours in a given year. And so you just got to recognize the magnitude and the impact that family will have in the life and heart of a kid. That's just going to be by sheer nature of the way family is designed. They're going to have influence. Now, here's the point. The point is, if you're going to have influence in the life of a kid, you can't just ignore the family. You've got to understand that it's important for you to partner with the family in every way you possibly can if you want to have more and more influence. I actually think one of the greatest ways to partner with a family is not even by creating programs, but it's by leveraging the small group leader to see their role with the individual few, or the individual kid, or the few they have, as a connected thing to the family and the parents. So they're asking the question. So you as a small group leader is asking the question, how can I partner with this family, and how can I partner with a parent? For example, you should think in terms of having your student ministry, an open house at the beginning of the year where you bring the small group leaders and the parents together and you say, hey, this is what our scope and cycle is going to be this next year. Here's what we're going to cover with students. We wanted you as a parent to know, we wanted the small group leader to know, and we wanted you as a parent to meet the small group leader so you guys can understand that they're going to be involved in your kids' lives. But here's the truth. Maybe 30% of your parents will show up to that. Right? Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. We tried it, 30% showed up. What if I could raise that to 90% with one idea? You say, tell me. Okay, I'm going to tell you. You ready for this? If Gail, who's in charge of 6 or 9 7th grade girls or 5th grade girls or whatever her role is, decides with the other 60 or 70% of parents that didn't show up that she's going to invite some of them personally to Starbucks to sit down and say, oh, by the way, this is what they gave us. This is what we're going to talk about scope and cycle. And she invites those parents into a personal, invitation-driven experience. I guarantee your percentage will shoot up to about 90%, because I've very rarely met a parent who got a phone call from someone and said, listen, I'm going to be your small group, your son or daughter small group leader for the next year, and I would love to just hang out with you for 15 minutes to just tell you what we're going to talk about. But it means you're leaning into the small group leaders and you're saying, this is something we need you to understand as part of your job description, because we got to partner with parents. There's some practical application stuff here I just want you to make sure you understand and you see here. It means you cue the parent, which is kind of what I just described and explained. That you're helping the parent know what is happening in the life of their kid and their son and their daughter, so they understand the plan, and so they understand the strategy, so they understand when camp registration is going to happen, or what's going to happen at camp, or they understand what the plan is going to be this next month in content and curriculum as you're teaching their kids. So you leverage your life as a simple way to send an email, to send a text. By the way, one of the greatest ways, and I know that you talked about this today, is using Facebook to leverage it, to cue the parent. It also means that you honor the parent. It means that parents understand, don't miss this, parents understand that you're not their enemy, that you're on their side. There's a story that Chef, who wrote the Lead Small book with us, who's a middle school director, tells about a girl that called her small group leader upset and angry because she just had a knockdown drag out with her parents over grades. She'd had a bad report card, she got a knockdown drag out with her parents, walked out of the room, went up to her bedroom, slammed the door, and called her small group leader. So here's the small group leader on the phone, talking to this daughter about her unreasonable parents, obviously. And in the conversation, the small group leader was wise enough, even though the small group leader was a college student, she understood this principle. She was wise enough to say, well, you know what, I've met your mom before, and I don't think your mom is your enemy here. And why do you think, she started asking questions, why do you think your mom got upset? And do you feel like you pushed through it? Is there a better strategy we could come up with? And so, to make a long story short, in the conversation she was having with this teenage girl, they came up with a plan and a strategy. She changed the way this girl saw the conversation happening with her parents. The girl walks back downstairs and says to her parents, listen, I've been on the phone with my small group leader. I feel like I overreacted. You're right. We talked about a plan to improve my grades. What if we do this? How do you think that changed or affected the attitude her parents had toward the small group leader in the church? Simply because she honored the parent. Don't make the mistake in your ministry of leveraging yourself as the hero and the parent or the family is not the hero. Because when you help the family win, you help the parent win, you help the student win. Now, are there situations where parents are abusive and wrong? I mean, absolutely. But those are the exceptions. And we still need to look at those through a very, very careful filter. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when families and parents know you're honoring their family, and that also means that you reinforce the family. There's some practical tips here, just practical tips. That means you don't plan your gathering for your small group on Christmas Eve. You get it? And you understand the power of doing that and leveraging that in the right way. Another illustration related to this has to do with a girl who grew up in our student ministry who's one of our greatest volunteers. She worked with kids and she worked on our Kids Stuff production. You met this girl. She is just the dream of a teenage volunteer. She's just unbelievable. She came to me her senior year in high school. Her name is Caitlin, and she said, I have a dilemma. Nobody really knows this. I need to talk to you about something, but I've never been baptized. She said, I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus, but the reason I've never been baptized is because my mother will absolutely go crazy if she thinks I'm going to get baptized because she hates this church and she hates Christianity. And I don't know how to handle it, but I feel like before I graduate, before I walk away, I want to get baptized. What do I do? So I said, here's the thing. I don't know really exactly how to navigate through the waters with your mom and your relationship with her and how that relates to this, but I would at least like for you to go back and sit down with your mom and have a discussion. Have a conversation about the fact that you want to be baptized, and we'll baptize you, but I just want you to have a conversation with her about it. She comes to me the next week and she says, okay, I talked to my mom. She's cool with it. I'm going to do it. I want to be baptized. So we do this thing called birthday celebration where we have, all the kids and teenagers who made decisions to trust Christ. We put their story on video, then we baptize them. It's this big, gigantic production. We have birthday cake. We have the small group leaders there. We have family there. It's a packed auditorium just around the idea of here are kids who've said they've trusted Christ, and we want to make it a big deal. At the end of it, we invite, the parents and the small group leaders to gather around, the person they've come to watch, and we have this prayer of dedication. So we get to the end of this birthday celebration. Caitlin's on the stage with these other kids and teenagers. She's standing there, and I invite the small group leader and whoever is significant in her life to come stand with her and with the other kids. And in the back row, I see this lady get up and start walking down the aisle, carrying a dozen roses. It's Caitlin's mom. And she walks down the aisle, up the stairs, onto the platform. And she stands there with small group leaders and with other people, and she listens to them pray for her daughter. And for a moment in time, this mother who doesn't even like our church, who doesn't even believe in who Christ is, has this spiritual connection with her daughter because she didn't want to miss it. I got in the car and I'm driving home, and the only thing I could think in my mind is, she would have missed it. She would have missed it. I just think it's important that we understand how to do what we do in the context of inviting parents and inviting families in for the ride. Sure, sometimes they're not going to show up, but what if they do?
Okay, on your discussion guide, you have two questions there. One is if you are a small group leader, and one is if you're a parent. And if you're both, you can pick and choose. But I'm going to give you guys, just for the sake of time, about 5 minutes. That means about 1 or 2 minutes per person at a table, unless your table's small. And just answer those questions at your table and try to have some good short discussion, okay?
We're gonna play the yes game one more time. So I need this time a really brave man. I see one back in the corner that would be an excellent candidate if he would like to come up this way. And I need Barton and David to come join. I didn't give you a choice, John. That's you. You're willing to say yes, aren't you? He's so funny if you said yes, John.
Save me $10. 10 minutes tomorrow night.
Remember, he knows where you live.
Hey, I'm picking both of them. Remember that.
Okay, turn around. You're gonna say yes to kids, right? You're willing, right? John, pretty please.
Fair discipline and firewood.
Uh-oh, look behind you, John.
Are you willing to say
I'll help
yes?
you with what?
No need to say yes for that.
A reluctant yes? Any yes? All right. It might be the boys who regret this one. So the question is, are you willing to be the center of target practice?
I have more guns than
Okay. You're not supposed to shoot a guy when he's running from her.
That's why I put it on there. Oh, I mean, put it on.
On your marks. Well, wait a minute. There's also some balls on yarn balls on the tables here. If anybody would like to join, feel free. On your mark. Get set. Go! I knew it was coming back. I knew it. So much for the table decor. Okay, enough of the silliness. Thank you so much, John, for being a good sport. We have a prize for you. We would like you to... You got your own prize, don't you? Choose a book that you would like to take home with you, as well as a key ring.
Which one do you want to read? Katie, which one do you want to read?
Parenting Beyond Your Capacity. I'll read that one.
Thank you so much. Okay, for the sake of time, we're going to do 2 videos back to back. There's 2 more videos. We're going to do Make It Personal, which is your green sheet here, but we'll skip that discussion question just for the sake of time. And then we'll immediately go to the Move Them Out video and then have our final time together, okay?
It also means there's another part of this job description, and this is where I would take everything away and I would bring it back to you for just a minute. Because I would say this is the part where I think is huge for you to think in terms of, and that's, at the end of the day, one of the reasons why you're in their life is because this can become personal in a way, and you've got to make it personal. You have this opportunity to be on the front row with kids, and they're going to be watching your life. And I don't say that to put pressure on you, because you're not perfect. You've got your own mess, and you've got your own baggage, and God has called you into leading a group of kids, but God is going to use you because God wants to put your life and your struggles and your story of restoration, redemption kind of up front so they can see it work out in your life. But that also means that you've got to decide in your life how to make sure you guard your own personal growth and your own spiritual growth and development as well. I don't want to give you a job description and say, as a small group leader, you just do all this stuff without at least some point, turning the spotlight internally into your own life and go, where and how do I need to continue to grow? So there's some practical applications with that we'll talk about. 2 or 3 things here. Number 1, live in community. What that means is, you have to have community too. You have to be doing faith with other people that are your peers as well. Trust me on this. If you're leading 9 or 4, 5-year-olds in a small group and that's your few, they are not your community. You still need community. You need other adults in your life who can lean into you where you can dump your baggage in a different way. You don't need to dump all of your baggage into the life of a 6th grade or 7th grade group. They can't handle it. So you need to model what you say you're trying to do with them, and that's why I would say to every person I would ask the question, where's your community? Where's the few you're doing life with and faith with? And what does that look like for you? You have to live in community. You have to set priorities. This is a great opportunity for them to look into your personal life and see how you prioritize, because some of these kids may not have role models that are keeping their priorities straight. This is why as a husband or as a wife leading a small group, they can see your marriage. Or why as a parent leading your children, they can see the priority you make your children. There's just some practical things here. For example, there are times where your priorities may compete with your commitment to your few, and that's okay because it's a way to demonstrate to them your priorities. There should never be a moment where you have this conversation with your 7th, 9th grade boys. Well, guys, I wanted to go to a movie with you tonight, even though it was my anniversary, because I felt like I really wanted to hang out with you guys instead of my wife. No. That seems the wrong signal. Again, it's about making it personal in your own life. It's about being real. Being who you are. Can I give you some really good news? I'll give you some really, really good news. You don't have to be cool to lead teenagers. The reason that's good news is because I've met some of you and you're not. But the best small group leaders in the lives of teenagers are not the coolest people I've ever met. They're people who are real. I wish I could introduce you to a guy named Bob. He's 80 years old. Bob has led, I think, middle school boys for like 30, 40 years. We gave him an Orange Award at Orange Conference a few years ago because we wanted Bob to know that he is the goal. Someone who, trust me, I've seen the way he dresses. There's nothing cool about him. But the boys he's led know that he cares about them, and he loves them, and they have a place to belong to someone who believes in them. Put my circle back up here, put you back up here, and I'm going to move you out. Because the last illustration is this. Your job description is to move them out of the circle. To move them beyond the circle. You're not simply trying to create a small group where you do life with a few so they think that's where life stops. Your goal is to create an opportunity to put them in a circle so they understand they're part of a bigger story. And from day one, your job is to move them beyond that circle to help them engage with a story that's bigger than just their story. To connect them to the bigger concept of what it means to be the church. At the end of the day, we're going to unpack this even more. But for right now, I just want you to know this. And what this means practically, 3 things. Move them to someone else. Fuller Institute, Baylor, all these research organizations out there will say that a kid who has 3 to 4 to 5 adults in their life during their time in a church, consistent adults, will have a greater chance of having a mobilized faith than kids who don't. In other words, You put other adults in their life besides just you. This isn't about connecting them just to you. This is about connecting them to other adults as well. This is why it's so important to organize your groups in a way that when you divide and when you grow, there's a leader who's with the kids in an apprentice kind of model where that leader can go with a group of kids. And if you get upset sometimes because there's another leader your kids are getting connected to and they're moving past you, then just get over it. Because it's not about you. It's about discipling kids to understand how to be connected. And the more adults you connect them, the bigger you're going to create their concept of who God is, because they're going to be connected and see God through the prism of other adults as well. That's why it's important to send them to a mission trip with another adult. That's why it's important to reach in and to find other adults in their family or other adults in their life and connect them to those adults, to move them to someone else and to move them to be the church. To understand that their mission is not what happens in the circle. Their mission is what happens outside the circle. That's why in the teenage years, and we're going to dig into this deeper, but that's why in the teenage years it is essential for kids to have opportunities to do ministry as a group with their leaders that's bigger than just their local church. You want to move them to be the church, to understand what it means to be the church, so that while they're with you, they experience ministry, so that one day when they're not with you, that's in their DNA, and they've experienced what God can do through them, and they understand. By the way, I'll talk about that later, never mind. End of the day. Move them to what's next. If I had time, we would unpack what it means to walk with them relationally through transitions. A lady asked me earlier, what do you do, to make sure that kids don't lose their faith before they walk away, and how do you carry them through transitions? The best way to carry kids through transitions is to think in terms of the critical transitions and what relationships are in their life and in place. If I had time today, we would spend at least an hour talking only about this one issue, what we do with 11th grade to the first year of college. Because that's where the dropout rate happens. And if we're not connecting people relationally to people who stay in their life over and through that window, we're setting kids up to get disconnected at the time that's most critical. The reason I say that is because I have kids who come up to me who will say, I never felt more abandoned by my church than I did on graduation Sunday. Because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to connect. And the relationships I had in place were gone. And the church just kind of assumed that now I'm a 12th grader, I've graduated from high school, so I'm an adult. There's not a sociologist or a psychologist or any research entity in the country that will tell you a kid is an adult at 18 or 19. They're transitioning. And we're taking the relationships away from them at the time they need them the most. I could give you 4 or 5 principles related to this. You just got to understand, we've got to set them up for the long haul. Because here's the deal. From the time they show up in your world, they're packing their bags. I was talking to a couple of young parents this last week who have newborns. Now, we just did this blog on Orange Parents. You ought to go read the blog. It's called About Holding On and Letting Go. From the time your children are born, they're packing their bags. Just got to know it. It's going to happen fast. From the time they show up in your ministry and you have them for just a little bit of time, you're packing their bag. And what they carry with them into adulthood, you have the opportunity to influence. So what are you going to help them pack? What are you going to help them put in the bag? You with me on this? I mean, just understand. I have 4 children, 27, 25, 24, 27, 25, 23, and 21. It's an odd year, I remember this. When Hannah, my oldest, moved out of the house, it snuck up on me. I showed up one afternoon, Debbie said, she's packed up and she's gone. I said, what do you mean? Oh, she moved today. I ran downstairs to the basement, it looked like a tornado had hit the basement. Stuff was everywhere, and I'm sitting there sorting through it. Why did she take what she took, and why did she leave what she left? My middle daughter came down, we were both emotional. I mean, it was just this emotional moment. It's not like Hannah hasn't warned me. I mean, she's been saying since she was in the 5th grade, I'm going to be away one day, Dad. So, I mean, I knew it was coming. And Sarah's standing there next to me, and she's crying, and I'm crying, and I realize she's crying for an entirely different reason. She's like, Dad, she took all the curling irons. You know what I really, in my mind, prayed for that week more than anything else? That God would put other adults in her life at this next stage and phase of her life, as a young college-age person who would speak into her world, like other adults have spoken into her world during her teenage years, who said things that I couldn't say. It's interesting. There were moments I'd ride down the road with Hannah or Reggie Paul or my kids, and they would say, oh, you know what, Clay said this today in our small group, and Jared said this, and I'd be going, I've been saying that for 16 years. But it was somebody else, another voice. Here's the point. What we just talked about, you can't do for many. You can't be present for a lot of people. That's called Facebook, and you're not really being present. You can't create a safe place for hundreds, but you can for a few. You can't partner with everybody's family, but you can for a few. You can't model up close and personal for everyone, but you can for a few. And you can't move someone to what's next and be personally involved with packing their bags with hundreds of kids, but you can for a few.
If you'll look on your very last discussion guide question, the red at the top, moving up. For those of you that are parents, I'd like for you just to think for a few minutes about question 1 there. Are your children connected with multiple adults outside of you and their family? I'd like to challenge you, again, just for the sake of time, we won't do this at our table, so I'd like to challenge you guys to think about how can you grow that circle for your own children? How can you help them get connected? And even if they're outside your house, if they're grown children, it's not too late to encourage that in their lives. And then the question number 2, as our children grow into their adolescent years, they want to feel like they are a part of they want to feel like they are doing something significant. They need to have a sense of being a part of and a part of a bigger story. What kinds of things could you do or have you done with your students or your kids to help them regularly take ownership and be the church? I wonder if anybody has any thoughts here of what it looks like for our students in particular and our younger kids to be the church. Does anybody have anything they're just willing to, just comes to mind, they'd be willing to share, kind of putting us on the spot because we haven't talked about it. And I'm going to bring the microphone just so the video will pick this up.
I just happened to be with these 3 here, and I just remember not too long ago, I went to this thing with the soccer camp that they had at the end, and I missed all that happened before this. But I came up here, and these 3 here, with several others, they put on a production that was like a fantastic play that you pay money to go see. And it was like, and my wife was telling me, it was like that every single day, the whole way through. And I said, that is just amazing that they put it on. And these 3 here, at the age that they are, they put forth a tremendous show and put forth a lot of effort and showed a lot of talent and expressed a lot of ownership in what they did.
A couple of students sitting over there that participated in the soccer camp skit production that went on New York City with us, and we got a couple of students sitting back at this table as well. Cody was here earlier. Yeah, Tom.
I think along with what Steve was saying, we're giving opportunity for service to the church coming up in the soccer camp and the leadership that they took. But we're giving opportunity, and I'm envisioning that it'll eventually be the youth that are doing the small groups. Now, I'm out of line here. That was just me.
It has been exciting for some of you guys that are in children's ministry to see this past year we had some of our students plugged into children's ministry and just really making a difference in the lives of our kids. So when they came to soccer camp, it wasn't just them plugging in at soccer camp one time a year, but some of these kids were beginning to establish relationships. So it's a great investment. Any other thoughts with that? Okay. We just want to offer a time. I know it's already 8:30, so thank you for being here. If you need to slip out, we totally understand that. Please feel free to do that. But we do want to offer a time if you guys have any questions or answers. This has kind of been it has been a big vision casting We've talked about a lot of big ideas. We haven't really fleshed out a lot of practical stuff for you. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to ask us. We may not have time to devote to that. We're going to have follow-up specific youth ministry meetings and children's ministry meetings to talk about some of that stuff. But if anybody has any questions for any of us, there's very colored shirt people in here. They're part of our leadership team, volunteer and staff, and then not everyone's wearing a shirt. There's other leaders in here as well. Or we're all wearing shirts, never mind. I do this all the time in youth ministry. But does anybody have any questions they'd like to address to anyone? Yeah.
How do you implement the one-on-one relationships with care guidelines in place?
Okay, so the question was, how do we implement the one-on-one relationships with care guidelines in place? And that's a good question. We expect you to be in your small group with a group of children, not one-on-one. We expect that so that's where a lot of the relationship building will happen. I know we have talked about the showing up randomly thing, where you might show up at a kid's soccer game or something like that to cheer them on. Don't take that word randomly to mean that you show up by surprise, okay? There's a difference there. You might surprise the kid, but never surprise the parents, okay? We expect that you would be invited there and you'd be saying, I'm going to see their soccer game, and is that okay if I come join you? So you'd be going along, say, and meeting the parents there to cheer them on, especially when we're talking younger, littler kids. So we're not giving you permission to be stalkerish or anything like that, okay? Some of those get into the nitty-gritty questions, and I'd be happy to answer those in more detail when it comes to children, but primarily you would still be with 6 to 8 kids, building relationships with that small group in a classroom where there may be another small group meeting with another leader. So it's still well within our care policy.
But they were talking about, the question we had at the table was, you're talking about building deep relationships that would involve, if someone wants to ask about their doubts, their questions, they're not going to do that. They're going to want to do that more individually than they're going to want to do that in a group of 6 or 8. Now, I realize that you're probably not going to get those kind of questions if you're with 3rd grade. But if you're working with junior high, high school kids, very much they're going to want to talk to you privately.
The greatest thing there is having, you want to answer that?
So I can speak to that. Some of the policies that we've had in place for student ministry has been that you're never alone with a kid. So if you work with junior high, you get their parent to, if you're going to meet in a place, you meet in a public place. Always meet in a public place. Have parents' permission. Have the parent drop them off. Don't ride with them. And it's always same gender. Never male, a male leader with a female student or vice versa. And part of that is us communicating on a regular basis with our leaders and with our parents, and we just say if you are meeting with a kid outside, then you need to communicate with the parent that you're doing that. And does that help address some of that a little bit?
I would just add to that, it's really important that you are actually communicating with the parent and not just asking the student if they said it was okay.
Absolutely.
You actually speak to the parent themselves. Any other questions on that? Sure, Mike?
Heaven forbid if it ever happens that one day one of our few we find out is being hurt, or it's hurting others, or hurting themselves. Do we have the resources in place, the people in authority that we need to go to? Again, heaven forbid if it ever came back. We need to know what to do when the time comes.
We would definitely ask you to come to a staff member right away if you have something like that, and to help guide you in making decisions, how we talk to parents and stuff like that when we need to, deal with that, I think.
Yeah. We have resources beyond us, but always, any issue like that, always come to the staff member in that department, so that if there's access ministries or children's ministry, so that we can go to those resources and deal with it in the right number.
Oh, Denise, go ahead.
2 questions. So how does Lead Small change the small group model for senior high and junior high?
It doesn't really.
Okay. And
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay, okay. And two, how is it really going to be applied at the elementary level? I know you said you hadn't flushed all the details out, but yet you kind of are asking us to kind of sort of commit.
Sure, absolutely.
What are we committing to?
Okay. Say yes. We'll tell you later. Basically, this is kind of a little bit of more of an organic change, if that makes sense. We'll still have Sunday morning in Sunday school on Sunday mornings. It will be a small group model. So we're going to, have chairs in circles or circle rugs, depending on the ages and so forth. We may even put up a few partitions just to kind of give some separation so that you can have conversations a little easier with your group. But essentially, we're working to get small groups from at least 3 years old on up. It won't take a lot for us to do that because this last year we had 3 and 4 leaders in every classroom of 20 to 24 kids. So if you just it's just a matter of saying to this leader, we want to make these few the ones you focus on. So we're asking that you focus on these kids and stay with them. In the younger years, it may be for 1 year. In the elementary, we may say it'd be awesome if you'd like to stay for 2 or 3 years before we pass them off on to another small group leader. And then as they get up into high school, we might ask you to stay all the way through high school. So, does that answer your question?
It does, and it also, kind of taking the presentation, the responsibility is also to connect with the families.
Right. So we're hoping that by giving children this small group leader who will focus on 6 children, let's say, for over a period of time, and those small group leaders will connect with those families, and they'll know that that person is shepherding them at church and helping them, and is taking an interest in their family and supporting them. We're also in children's ministry, just some really practical things. We're going to be sending things home to mom and dad to help them know the conversations that we're having, what it is that it's being taught in the lessons, and giving them your contact information, you getting their contact information, giving you opportunities to do outings together so that, we might go roller skating together and have our small group leader come with that group and their families, just to give time for them to do things together and build relationships in those ways. Just for the sake of the time, I know some people need to leave. So if you've got questions and want to address those with us, Jean Ann is here. She oversees Access Ministries. Kelly and Tricia oversee Children Ministry. And then Michael and myself and Jordan is in the back. We oversee Youth Ministry. And then there's others. Tricia's leadership team also have on some of the tie-dye shirts with us. So please feel free to ask us questions. There is not a commitment card, but just a general info card on the tables. If you guys would take some time just to fill those out, and you can leave them on the table for us. That way we've at least got information of who was here this evening and how can we best follow up with you. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to come and talk to us. Thank you so much for being here. We also have the books for sale back there. Remember, tonight we give you guys the discount. And am I missing anything? Any other announcements? All right. Thank you guys so much for being here and for your time commitment. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Please feel free. There's lots of food. Orange circle food.